Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing. Just want to make sure the audio is good here. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. All right. Be really nice if I could cast this to my TV without it opening up the YouTube app. I'm just trying to watch the chat so I don't miss anything here. All right, so I think we're live. And while I wait to see if anyone jumps in here, maybe a good place to start would be... Man, that's a really hard one because I'm not sure where everyone's at. We got a lot of new people in the group today. $50, 67 people. So looks like we got about 50 people. All right. So does anyone have anything they want to talk about? That's probably a good place to start.
Hey, can you hear me, Bob?
I can. How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Very good.
All right. I guess first of all, I want to say thank you for doing this. Reaching out and reaching down, trying to help others that don't have as much experience as you. It's always nice.
Yeah, of course. Someone did something very similar for me a few years back and really helped me out. You know, I was stuck on something for like over a month, and they spent 20 minutes helping me get unstuck, and it just made me so happy, you know. So that's what I'm hoping to do for some other people. What's your name, by the way?
My name's Taylor. I'm also Abba Zabba in the group. And that's sort of my moniker online.
Cool. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Thanks, Bob. I guess where I'm at, I've got about 5 months of coding experience. I'm in a boot camp, 100 devs, about halfway through. It teaches full stack. We just full stack JavaScript. We just finished the front end. We're moving to the back end. And part of the boot camp is to reach out and to have coffee chats with people who already have jobs as software engineers in the industry. And one thing that I keep on wondering, I guess there's one thing that they keep on asking me, like, hey, can I help you with anything? that I haven't got yet is I get the methods, I get the syntax, I get how to write JavaScript. The problem and the disconnect that I have most of the time is if it's not a simple problem that's really easily spelled out, like I'm going to give you, the problem says, I'm going to give you an array. How do you get the sum of all the array elements, right? So that would be something like reduce. But it's when it's anything a little more, I don't know, heady than that, it's really hard for me to take the bird's eye view and then split it up into small problems that I can then write code to solve. And I guess that's the main thing that I would be asking if are there any ideas? Are there any techniques for breaking things down? Or do you have any advice on that?
I definitely think that a lot of that just sort of comes with practice, but maybe a good place to start would be, do you want to try talking through some problems and actually, I don't want to just kind of like give you the answer, but do you want to talk through something and see if we can solve it, and I'll maybe nudge you in the right direction if we're not quite getting there?
Honestly, I don't have any problems like right now or like any specific situation that I would need help with. Because right now I'm just doing like a code wars every day, like the A7 and 8 Qs, the lower difficulty one, just to get my practice, get my syntax in, and get myself familiar with all the methods.
Okay.
But I don't really have anything because with code wars, there are solutions. So what I do is when I get stuck on a code war, I just Google, I'll spend 20 minutes trying to figure it out. If I don't figure it out, I'll look up the answer and then I'll work it backwards. And then that helps, but that seems to be solution, very, very specific. And I was just wondering if there was anything that might be able to tie all of these, hundreds of developer created fake problems to, I don't know.
So what's your experience with the JavaScript ecosystem? Have you done any front end work, or are you mostly just learning like pure JavaScript right now?
So pure JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, no frameworks or anything like that so far. My experience is I've built HTML, CSS sites from scratch. I've messed with some templates, and I've actually got a couple clients, which is part of the boot camp. I got a couple paid clients from friends of friends and people, just small businesses in my area, where I reach out and I say, hey, I see you don't have a website. My price is this or that, or, we do it based on whatever they want to buy. But those have been small to medium-sized companies, so it's mostly just like a static page, a section for some reviews from some previous customers, like a services list with some prices, a phone number, address, hours, stuff like that. So it's nothing JavaScript heavy. If anything, it's HTML and CSS heavy so far. I'm just not sure how I'm going to translate that into working on production level code.
Okay, so for one, just take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I also haven't been doing this all that long. It's just something I'm like really passionate about, but I'll definitely like share my opinion on this with you.
Okay.
I think that once you're building actual web applications, I think that's where you start to get away from the theory and get more into the practice. So, if you're just learning about arrays and objects and classes and methods, it's really hard to know exactly how that plays into building a web application or taking a payment through Stripe or anything like that. So I think that one of the best ways to put it to practice is to actually try, like integrating with third-party services, installing different libraries, and reading the documentation, seeing if you could kind of figure it out. The way I sort of look at everything is that when you're doing web development work, a lot of it comes down to arrays and objects. So if you need a collection of something, if you have a list of customers or products, obviously that's going to be an array. Any type of list is always an array. And then, inside of that array, you're probably going to have a bunch of objects. And I know that's like a really reductive point of view, but that's really what everything kind of comes down to at the end of the day. So I think just kind of like clearly defining the problem that you're working on, or like what you're trying to solve, and then deconstructing it from there. It's really hard to do if you don't have a specific problem that you're trying to solve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And whenever I'm given a problem that's one of those specific things, like in this array, I need you to do this, like with this object, how do you get this property? Even with APIs, reaching out and doing a fetch request and interacting with that data with the different classes and the levels of, I guess, objects that an API can hold, like the NASA picture of the day API, that seems obvious when I'm in the moment with something like that, but I'm just not sure how that would, I don't know, like I feel, I think Front End Mentor is a really good website for practicing like CSS and HTML, and that's like the application of it, right? So you want it to be red, you want a big block on the right and a small block on the left, and like it's very specific about, you start with nothing and then you get to a very specific point. I guess, do you know of any websites besides like Code Wars or LeetCode or HackerRank that would have those JavaScript type problems that I could put this more into practice? That way it's less theory and more application. Is there anything that you know of?
I think you're in sort of a rough spot with this. I'm not sure how you best learn things. So for me, I think what helped everything start to click for me was I did a lot of classes on Udemy, and they were all like project-based classes. But what I would do is, instead of following what the instructor was doing step by step, I would sort of build something in parallel. So if they were building an application to track meetups, I might build an application to, I can't think of a good analogy. I can't remember anything I actually did, but I wouldn't follow it one-to-one. I would kind of just, like follow in parallel. And I think that's what helped me to get that solid understanding of the real world concepts. But the only time I do anything with LeetCode, for example, is specifically when I have an interview coming up, and I just need to like cram on data structures and algorithms, for a few weeks before the interview. So I,
Gotcha.
I wish I had some better recommendations there. But how do you learn? What's your favorite way to learn?
Well, it's actually my least favorite way to learn, but it is the most effective. I find something where someone has written it and it works, and then I screw it up by trying to edit it and change the classes and look for different properties, and then I fix it in a way that it wasn't originally written, and it's incredibly frustrating and it's incredibly uncomfortable. But it seems like that's the best way that I learn, is I get pre-made JavaScript in front of me, I add some stuff to it, I take some stuff away from it, it doesn't work, I get error codes, and then I figure out how to fix them, and it's different than the beginning.
Okay. One more thing that I will mention, because this might make a difference for you, is that when you're writing imperative JavaScript, like the way that you manipulate the DOM, you have a variable, you might create a variable called button, and then you'll do the document.querySelector or document.getElements by ID, and then you sort of grab the button, and then you add, classes to the button. Like that way of writing web applications is incredibly unintuitive, and I think it's easy to really just get lost in the syntax. Whereas if you're using React or Vue or Svelte, like any type of front-end framework, it's declarative. So instead of saying, I need you to take these 10 steps to make something happen, you sort of say, this is the end product that I'm trying to get, and the framework does all the heavy lifting for you to get it there. So I know this is like a really contentious thing, and a lot of people would probably disagree, but I don't think you need to be a JavaScript master before you start picking up frameworks. I actually think that if you feel like you're not progressing quick enough, or if you feel like you're not getting that like real life example stuff, I think picking up a framework could actually be a really great learning opportunity.
Okay. I might be misremembering this. Were you saying that working off JavaScript, if someone was to learn React, that maybe they should learn Vue first, because that somehow learning Vue makes it easier to learn React rather than just going straight into React? I might be messing up my Reddit.
I did say that, but again, it's highly subjective, and I don't think everyone would agree with me there. That's just my personal experience. So I tried learning React originally. I couldn't, it just wouldn't click for me. I had some fundamental disconnect from it. Then I learned Vue, which is fundamentally just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you know those three, then you're like 80% of the way to being able to build web apps with Vue. So what Vue taught me was, it taught me the component-based architecture, and it just kind of taught me like modern web development best practices. And then when I tried learning React again after that, it was so much easier for me to understand. I think it's kind of hard to learn the syntax and the framework, uh, all at the same time. So, like with React, for example, you're using JSX. So that adds a whole additional level of complexity while you're also trying to learn component-based architecture and how the reactivity system works. So, that's why I think it's easier to learn Vue first. But again, it's highly subjective. So I'm not going to say that this is the best way to do it. It's just what worked for me.
Okay. You either said component-based architecture or container-based architecture. I think Docker is container. Were you saying, I misheard you. Was it container or
Component.
the other thing?
Yeah, component.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
have you ever seen a React or a Vue application? Have you ever like gone through the file structure and taken a look at what these projects look like?
No, I haven't looked at the code yet. Just it looks really clean on the front end, just looking at like the page.
Okay. Are you in a rush? And could you see my screen, because I could pull up an example and show you and maybe demystify it a little bit?
I'm not in a rush, but I think I can see your screen. Let's see. I can see your picture. Oh, okay, that might be something. I think that was just another person joining.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, would I need to go to the YouTube channel to see your screen?
Yeah, or I could share it on Discord. I'm like, I always feel like such an old man when I'm using Discord. I have so much trouble figuring out how this stuff works, but let me see if I could. I'll try to share my screen here.
I'm on my phone, so I feel like if I tried to bring up YouTube and be on the call with you, it'd echo a lot.
Okay.
What are you guys doing?
We're gonna go over some. I'm trying to show them what component-based architecture means, so I'm just gonna pull up a web application and. Sorry, I just went live, so let me know if there's an echo or anything.
Component?
Yeah.
React?
We can see your screen.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we can either look at a React app or a Vue app. I think I'm going to pull up a Vue app just because Vue is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so I think that would be a good place to start. So bear with me for 1 second while I find one.
React is also HTML, CSS.
Yeah, but React has the JSX. So let's see here. We got a lot of background noise from one of these.
That's here. But
okay.
You don't have to make your files JSX files to do React though.
I'm sorry, real quick, Nasir, I'm gonna mute you just for a few minutes because we've got a lot of noise coming from there. I'll unmute you in just a few minutes, okay? Oh, man. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to, but I'm not sure anybody writes React without JSX these days. Like the file doesn't have to be a JSX file; it just has to be a .js or a .ts file. But ultimately, like anytime you're writing React, you're going to be using JSX.
True.
You know what? I have trouble remembering what frameworks I used for these projects, so we'll just see what this one is and we'll run with it. Okay, so this is a Vue app.
All I see is Discord on your live stream. Maybe change the windows.
Gotcha. All right.
You can do it and share your screen on the bottom of the menu.
On Discord?
Yeah. And then you can do like what screen you want.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, is this better?
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that's VS Code, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so everything sort of comes down to this. Well, I'm not gonna say everything comes down to this, but we have this app.vue file, and this is sort of like our base file here. So we have our template, which is just our HTML. We have the script tag, which is our JavaScript. And then we have the style tag, which is our CSS. So that's why I say that it's so easy to use Vue, is because that's really what it comes down to. It's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But then what we have here, this layout component, it looks like HTML, but it's really just referencing another component called layout, which is right here. And again, it's the same thing. It's just HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, although I don't have any styles here. But then inside of this layout file, again, I have a tasks component, which I'm importing right here, and I threw it in the template. So I mean, this is all I mean by component-based architecture, where you just break everything up into little fragments of code, and then you just nest them inside of each other. You know, you can render them conditionally, you know, if you want to show it based on, you know, certain variables or criteria. So that's all I'm referring to when I say component-based architecture.
Okay, cool. And you don't have to worry about the separation of concerns in the Vue file, or is everything, like, obviously the well, I actually don't see in the JS where it links a JS file. It links another Vue file. Well, I mean,
yeah, okay. So the one thing about the separation of concerns is that I feel like that's sort of an almost antiquated idea. It's funny because there's a lot of debate about that online. Some people will argue for it, but I feel like that was much bigger before Angular, you know, got really popular. Because now with, you know, if you're using React or if you're using Vue or any framework really, you're going to have, generally speaking, and this isn't like an overarching rule, but generally speaking, you're going to have your HTML and your JavaScript usually in the same file. There are ways of building your application so you don't have to do that. So, for example, instead of putting my styles here, yeah.
Right. Wait, so you're saying... Wait, so you actually just put everything in one Vue file?
Yeah.
Meaning that you don't separate. I feel like that's the rule of thumb in the industry, though.
So
to have separation of concern.
So if you're using React or if you're using Vue, you're going to be creating single file components. So when you see SFC, you know, if you're reading like a Medium article, that's what SFC stands for. So a single file component, or even web components like lit element or stencil.js, what it's doing is it's taking your HTML, your CSS, and your JavaScript, and you're creating an individual component in one file that contains your style, your template, your markdown, and your JavaScript, or you know, your reactivity and functions. So that's why I say that the separation of concerns is sort of like, I don't want to say an antiquated idea, but it's, you know, the web development community as a whole, it seems like no one's ever satisfied. You know, we're always jumping back and forth between paradigms, and maybe it'll be, maybe there'll be some new frameworks in a few years that strictly keep your JavaScript and your CSS and HTML all in separate files. But right now, this is the way that people seem to be doing component-based architecture. But what I'm doing right here, you can see that I'm importing a font. But the same way that I'm importing this font here inside of the style tag, you could also import an entire CSS file. So if you really want to keep your CSS in a separate file, you can absolutely do that. But that's just not really the way that anyone's building web applications these days. Not if you're using React or Vue or Angular or Svelte.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I guess this has been Vue. Can we see what React looks like?
Absolutely. Let me just open up another app here. I know I built one of these with React, so we'll find it. Okay, that's also Vue.
I also I'm pretty sure that functional components are much more preferred than
Class components, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely. I think it was React 16 point, oh man, I wish I remembered. 16.7 that introduced the functional components. And just like mentioned that this is just how everyone builds applications these days, I would bet a lot of money that if you apply for 100 like React positions, 99 of them at least are going to use function components. Anyone who hasn't migrated their architecture from like the class components to the functional components, they're I don't know, they're just pretty far behind. And this actually isn't
Yeah, I
React.
agree.
This is Solid.js, which is another framework. It looks a lot like React, but it's not. So let me pull up an actual React app.
Do you have one that's working?
Yeah, I'm sure I do. I just forget what half of these are. That's all. Yeah, I'll find one though. No, that's also Vue. Okay, maybe oh, okay, I see. Oh, here we go. We have a React class I did. This should have some React in it. All right.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, so this is a React app, but this looks way too small. I know this project, and that's definitely not the correct version of it. Okay, so this is also React. It's using Typescript instead of JavaScript, but I'll install the dependencies and see if this works. So who am I talking with here? I don't think I got your name. Yeah, I know you.
Me?
Is it Calvi? Are you the other one I'm talking to?
I was talking, yeah.
Okay. All right, we just gotta give this another minute for the dependencies to finish installing.
Const users colon user array equals. So this is an array of objects,
Exactly.
the users.
Yeah, this is TypeScript. So if you're not familiar with TypeScript, just think of it. I mean, it's really just JavaScript with types. So by putting the colon after it, I say that I want this array of objects to be of type user, which is an interface I'm creating. I'll do a whole like stream at some point to go over a bunch of like TypeScript things because I love TypeScript. But yeah, I know this might look a little bit more confusing than it needs to be, but we're just saying this array is an array of user objects, and user objects are objects that have a name that's a string and an age that's a number.
Makes sense.
Did something not install here? React has no exported member use state. It certainly does.
I think you imported them wrong.
I imported them wrong?
On line 1. Because I think TypeScript is a bit different.
This should work. I actually think that my text editor might just be kind of glitched up. I think I just need to reopen it maybe. Yeah, okay.
Oh, it worked?
Yeah, it just, sometimes it gets hung up.
Noise.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so this looks like, I don't actually remember what this is, but all right, so it's just a very simple application where if you type someone's name, it just pulls up the details about them. So I don't remember what the purpose of this was, but I could just break it down really quick. In the index file, this is where the application gets mounted. So we're saying, this probably looks familiar, the document.query selector. What we're saying is that in the HTML file, which is, oops, right here, we have this div with an ID of root. So we're saying that we want to take this div right here and we want to mount the application into that div. So that's what's happening right here with the React DOM render method. And we're saying that we want to mount this root component. That's where we want it to start. The root component is defined right here. And we actually don't need those divs wrapped around it. It's just referencing the app component, which again is imported. And it's just a functional component right here. So yeah, this would be JSX. It looks like HTML, but it's not HTML. It's ultimately JavaScript under the hood, but it's JavaScript that has primitives. So just like you have strings and numbers and all the other data types that JavaScript has, JSX stands for JavaScript extended, and the extension, as they say, would be like these HTML elements, but represented in JavaScript. So the cool thing about this is if we want to add some conditional logic to it, we would just wrap it in curly braces, and then we could say show user search, and then we'll put the and symbol in there. So now if we have a variable called show user search, now it's going to show the user search. But if I change this to, if I add the bang operator before it, so we want to say if this is false, then show the user search. Now if we go back to it, okay, I don't really remember. I don't remember how I set this up because I don't even remember this app. But it looks like I've got more than just the user search inside of this user search component. So this is probably a bad place to show it.
I thought you would do like a question mark.
Yeah, ternary operator.
And then, yeah.
Yep. So I'll show an example of that. This is probably a better place to do it. Okay. Okay. So
right, the current user. Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say we have this input right here, and this is, I would imagine, just based on the name, it's probably this component right here. So if we want to only show it conditionally, we could maybe do this. I'll say math.random, and then let's round it.
You have it in current user, by the way, line 57.
Line 57. Oh yeah, okay. Even better. So yeah, so we have the ternary operator. So if there is a current user, then it's going to render this. If the current user is null, then it's going to render this. So that's the ternary operator. So another way to do this exact same thing, I'll just copy that code real quick. Another way to do the same thing is you could just say current user and we can get rid of this right here. And then if we want to render something, if it doesn't show up, then we could fall through with the OR operator. So I mean, it's JavaScript. So anything that will work in JavaScript will also work here. This would actually be a bad practice. You wouldn't want to have a fallback. But if you don't want to have, like up here, how we have this paragraph element where it says not found, if we don't care about rendering something conditionally, then this is how I would do it. Because we're just saying if there's a current user, then proceed to render this. But yeah, you would use a ternary operator if you want to conditionally render something, but to show something else, in the other instance. So either of these will work.
And I think there's an operator where it checks for the null value in current user.
So
Like a question mark and then a dot, something like that.
yeah, okay. So
I'm not sure.
Yeah, what you're referring to is, let me pull up Run.js. That's called nullish coalescing, I believe. So let's say we have an object. We'll say user. You guys can still see the screen, right? Okay. Okay, so we have this object. Actually, let's make it an array. We'll call it users. And then let's give it another object. And we'll say this is Sarah, but she doesn't have an age, so it's null. So that what you're referring to, the nullish coalescing, if we don't want to get an error when we're referencing this null value, we can do something like this. Let's say users.forEach user console log user.age. So obviously this is just printing it out over on the right side. But if we have some logic that depends on the user age and we want to have like a fall through value, so I'm not going to probably articulate this really well, so if I say something that doesn't make sense, just let me know and I'll try to find a better way to explain it. But let's say we want to create a value called age, and we can't have it be null for some reason. Maybe our app is going to crash if we have a null value because something important relies on it. What we can do here is... Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, what's up?
Can you undo that, actually, and do the console.log user.age?
Sure.
And then coalesce it with the question mark dot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that would that work?
Yeah, well, nothing's going to change in this instance, but what you would want to do, keep in mind, the nullish coalescing that's an ES6 feature. So if you're using, the reason I bring this up is like if I'm using Zapier, Zapier is just like a workflow automation tool, but it doesn't support ES6 features. So I would have to write the code a little bit differently. But what I'm saying here is that I'm putting this OR operator and saying that I want it to fall through. Let's say we have a default age of 20 for some reason. So now if the age is null, it's going to fall through to 20. But when you're using the nullish coalescing, you're just essentially making sure that you don't get a runtime error if there's a problem with that code. So a better example might be an if statement. So let's say if user.age is greater than 25, we'll console log user is over 25. I'll comment that out for a second. So Java, I'm sorry.
Else user is under 25.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to have, I'm trying to think of an actual example where this matters because, you know, the JavaScript runtime is pretty good about this stuff. So, okay, maybe this is a better way to demonstrate this. So you know how if we have, let's say we have a value of 0, we'll call it my number. And then if we say if my number, and we want to do something here. Okay, it's not gonna fall through, or it's not gonna go through with this if statement because 0 is going to turn into false. So that would be, what's the word for that? Type coercion. So it's in order to use an if statement, you need a Boolean statement. So what JavaScript is doing behind the scenes is it's taking the value and it's saying, okay, 0 isn't a Boolean. It's not true or false. So what do we think the user's trying to do? They're trying to figure out if this value exists. 0 is going to be turned into false by that logic. That's just the way the JavaScript runtime or the JIT compiler is going to work. So I think these are the instances where you need to worry about like the nullish coalescing a little bit more. What you used to see back in the day is you would see something like this. You would say if user and user.age is greater than 25. So we're making sure that it doesn't crash if we don't in fact have a user. And again, this is a horrible example because I didn't think of a good way to represent this. But yeah, to speak to what you were talking about, if you use the question mark after the object, it's just going to make sure you don't get a runtime error if the value is null, but if you have some logic that needs to follow. And then if it is null, you can always add the OR operator and then set something that you want it to fall through on. So we could say 0 or 67 as a string. Now we're getting your number is 67 because now it's not 0, so it's not being turned into null. It's being coerced into true, it's falling through, and it's giving us the correct value, or we can make it an actual number. So this is usually when I'm using the nullish coalescing, I have it followed by the OR operator with a fall through value. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't even remember how we got into this, but yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of confused when you were explaining what JavaScript does behind the scenes. Because I know in other languages, a 0 is what? True or false? I forget.
No, actually, this is a really good example. So since this is TypeScript, we can actually see exactly what the problem is here. We could say, let's create a value and we'll call it age. And then we'll say that it needs to be of type number. Let's say let, so we can define it. So let's say we have a function, set age. We'll give it a value of age. And let's say that we allow the user to enter a number or a string. Call this age to set. So now we have an error here because age isn't a number. It's saying string, the type of string or number is not assignable to type number. So if we want to fix this error, we would have to do this, something like parse int. So we're saying that we want to set this as, or we want to take this potential string and set it to be a number. Then we won't get the error anymore. We are still getting an error because it's not actually being used. So let's just log it out. And then let's actually run the function.
Why do you have to use it? Why does it give an error if you don't use it?
That's just because of my ESLint settings. So I have my text editor set up. Yeah, it's not that the language is going to fail. It's just that it's bad practice and you don't want to leave dead code in your applications. But why is this giving... Now this I'm actually confused about. This shouldn't be giving us an error. Variable age is used before it's assigned. Okay. So we should be probably printing that out in here. And let's move this into the component. Or I'm sorry, outside of the component rather. Oh, it was outside of the component. Yeah, so let's see if we get any errors now. Okay, age to set. Argument of string or number is not assignable to type string. So now, again, this is TypeScript, so we can also, this might be a better way to do it. We can just say as number. And now we won't have the error anymore. But, again, just like we were talking about that type coercion, it's not that JavaScript doesn't let you do this, but TypeScript compiles into JavaScript. So even though it's perfectly valid JavaScript without this, TypeScript just gives you that extra protection, you know, the assurance that you're not writing unsafe code. So it treats it more like Golang or, you know, any other strongly typed language, which means you're not going to get runtime errors. That's sort of the reassurance that TypeScript gives you. If your application compiles, it's not going to crash from runtime errors most of the time. Oh, yeah, the question you asked, though. So in other languages, if we're talking about Go or I mean, it doesn't really matter. Any strong typed language, it's not going to coerce a 0 to false. That's really just a JavaScript thing. There's probably some other languages that do it to some extent. I can't think of any offhand. That's one of the things that people tend to dislike about JavaScript. They don't like that you can assign a string to a number variable and vice versa. But I like it because I think that when you're building, especially like front-end user interfaces, it lets you do things that are really cool, like, if, or let's just say users. So if we have users, then we can do this. Where realistically, this shouldn't be valid code with a statically typed language because users isn't a Boolean. Users is an array of objects. So how are we giving it a condition that should be true or false and letting it fall through? I just think it's really intuitive when you're building front-end user interfaces to be able to write code like this. So I think that's like a feature of JavaScript where, I know some people think of it more as like a bug of the language, but I really like it.
Yeah, I'm on that other side.
You don't like it?
Because I think it's safer to have like type safety.
It is definitely safer. There's no question about that. But I guess I'll take the convenience over the safety occasionally. But that's the reason I use TypeScript so much. I like TypeScript because it forces me to write better code. Even if I want to get lazy and start cutting corners, it's always nice to be able to know the code is going to work. So where are you in your like software development journey? Are you learning any frameworks right now, or what languages are you working with? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a few React projects. That's what I'm learning right now. I want to go deeper into the MERN stack. So that's where I'm at right now and doing data structures and algos.
Okay.
So I can pass the interviews.
How long have you been learning?
I graduated with a CS degree in December, and I'm still trying to find a job after graduation.
So what languages were you working with in school? Was it Java or C++? Those seem to be the big ones.
Yeah, it was both, actually.
Oh, okay. All right, well then I can understand why you wouldn't be a big fan of JavaScript and the type coercion and nullish coalescing and all those weird toy language features, because I'm sure they hammered it in deep that's like not the right way to write code.
Well, it's not the right way to write code. If the language permits, I mean, who's to say that's not the way to write code?
Ideologues. People seem to have really strong opinions about this. I guess one of the things they probably taught you in school is object-oriented programming, right? Was there a big focus on that?
Yeah, it was 2 classes, one for C++, one for Java.
Yeah, I'm personally of the minds, I think object-oriented programming is terrible. I really prefer a more functional and procedural style, but I've noticed that that's like what all the school curriculums tend to teach, is like the solid principles and OOP. And when I started working at the company, What's up?
I was going to say, components are basically just objects, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, they are.
That's the way I see it.
They absolutely are. Even so, like with React, you have what's it called, the shadow DOM. If you actually look at the shadow DOM, all you're going to see is it's going to look like JSON data. So it's going to be like the name of the element, the order of the element, any nested element. It really is just an object at the end of the day. And then the browser is like a rendering engine for those objects.
Yeah.
But what I was saying about object-oriented programming is when I started the job that I'm currently working, all of the code was written in an object-oriented style. And both of the people above me at the company when I started, like the developers that were above me, one got fired and one quit, both at the exact same time.
Wait.
Yeah.
In JavaScript, you said?
Yeah, in JavaScript.
So they were doing like classical components?
Yeah, I guess what you would.
Or were they doing like class and then like that?
Oh, yeah, to be clear, I work with Vue, not React most of the time. I use React for a
Okay.
lot of my personal projects, but when I joined this company, everything that they built is mostly Vue. So when I say that it was an object-oriented style, what I mean by that is everything was classes, but not just that. It was also that MVC type of style. So there was the model, the view, and the controller. So if you're looking at a component like a single file component, where typically you're going to have the style, the template, and the logic all in one single component, this wasn't really like that. This was like we had a folder with all of the classes, and then it was broken down into like different categories. So, anyways, when I joined the company, a bunch of these apps were broken, and we had clients complaining about all this stuff. And so the people above me left, and I just got thrown in blind into the code base. And it was taking me so long to debug these stupid little problems because I had to jump through like 10 to 15 files sometimes to find where the bug was actually coming from. And it got
Right.
so frustrating and so time consuming that I eventually just asked, like, can we just rebuild this from the ground up? And I wrote it in a more like procedural type of style. And as we've hired more developers that we've brought into the company, they've had no problem picking it up. So I think that like if you're working for Microsoft, maybe like you're working on the operating system and there's thousands of developers and there's teams of, let's say, maybe like 10 to 15 developers, and someone's working on the task manager and someone's working on the clock. I think for that type of code base it makes a lot of sense to have an object oriented style because it makes it everything is encapsulated in a very clear and obvious way. But when you're building like these business CRUD applications where you're just reading and writing information from a database and rendering stuff in the browser, I think is like it's so much additional overhead and so much unnecessary complication to write your code in an object-oriented style. But that's just my opinion. I know people have really strong opinions about that.
Yeah. Okay, I see your point though.
Do do you have like a visceral reaction to that? Does hearing that sound like really wrong from the perspective that you come from?
Well, I think, OOP definitely simplifies things to me at least.
So
Um,
if you have a function and like right here we want to set the age, um what I see a lot of people doing with OOP is instead of having a function they're going to have a method called set age inside of a class called age setter, so it just adds like that added
right.
level of abstraction. And then you have to initialize the age setter, like you have to create a new age setter object and then you call the method from that. It just feels like so many extra steps to get to the same place. But again, like that's just probably the type of work that I'm doing. If I wasn't building web applications for pharmaceutical companies, maybe I'd have a different opinion.
I'm surprised they let you rebuild it from the ground up. I actually am working for my church's website, and I wanted to rebuild it from the ground up, but I didn't think that was like applicable in the real world, like the industry world, because normally they just give you a bunch of code and then they just try to make you decipher it rather than you building everything from scratch, I guess.
I guess it depends where you're working. The place that I work, at least, it's a biopharmaceutical company, and they're not very technical people. Like the software department's only a few years old at this point. So the leadership, they're pretty non-technical. So when I went to them and I said, I feel like I'm wasting way too much time trying to debug this code. I feel like I could have rebuilt the app 3 times over by now. I think they just took my word for it that it was a better investment of my time to just rebuild it. But that's just the company I'm working for. Who knows how it is with other places?
Right.
So what type of job are you looking for right now?
Web dev. I have my resume if you want to see it. It has links to my projects too.
Yeah, is it on like a GitHub profile, or where do you keep it?
I deployed it to. Hold up, let me search my. Yeah, it's on my GitHub, but I deployed it, so.
Okay, do you know the URL?
I do. 1 second. Wait, should I even?
Oh yeah, your information's
show
in
you?
there, right? So you might not want your like phone number and email and all that to end up in the video.
I'll show you this one, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I won't show you my resume.
Okay, yeah. If you want to share a project, that's cool.
Unless I want to unless I can DM it to you and then you give me
Yeah,
some recommendations.
I can look at it when we're not like on a live stream. But yeah.
I put it in general, by the way.
Okay.
It's basically just an e-commerce site.
Okay.
And using React. I don't know why it says failed to load B stores, but you could add to cart. Yeah, I have some console logs there. I should.
Oh no, I'm not
Yeah.
like criticizing your stuff. It's a habit. Like when I'm looking at a project, I always tend to pull up the terminal, but Okay, so it's like an Amazon clone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you built this in React?
And I basically serve the front end using a back end. And so all those books and images you see are actually, wait, I wonder if it's actually from the back end.
So did you use something like Next or Remix, or did you just use like create React app, right, to bootstrap it?
Yeah, the script, yeah.
Okay, and then
wait, to create React app to what?
To bootstrap the application, like to create the project structure.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So when you say it's serving it from the, if you use create React app, it's going to be serving it on the front end. But do you mean like it's pulling the book data from a back end, like a database?
Yeah, the data.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
The JSON.
Okay. And is that what it is? Is this all just JSON data? It's not actually using like MongoDB or MySQL or something?
No, I didn't get to that part yet.
Okay.
Where I should put a data component.
And what are you using for the styling? Are you using some sort of CSS framework, or are you using just vanilla?
Yeah, I think just CSS.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, it's nice. It's crisp.
So you can remove from cart and it updates and then proceed to checkout. You can do that.
Okay, and is this the rating, the stars? Is this like how many stars the book has?
Yeah. I hard coded that because it was just annoying. And I put a Stripe integration in, so you can actually put in your card number and stuff like that. But if you do like 777 all sevens and then just do buy now, it'll still work for whatever. Yeah.
Is it? I think it's.
Well, I think it was 4. I forget which one it is.
I think this is it, right? 4s and then 4 and then
yeah,
1s.
4, right? Something like that, yeah. And then processing, it should bring you back to the home page. I don't know why it's not.
Let's see. See what it's giving us here. Oh, so you're using Redux for the state management, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if we could find some context clues here. So they don't have IDs. I wonder if that's what. So I noticed when I was trying to add things to the cart. Oh, is that what was? I see. It was going up. I just didn't realize it was adding them. Okay. All right. All right. Let's try this again.
Hey, Bob, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for
Oh.
walking through some Vue and Angular or React. It was a great time. I look forward to the next stream.
Yeah, thanks for hopping in the call. I appreciate it. It was nice to meet you.
You as well. Y'all have a good night.
All right, you too. Thanks.
So, dude.
Bye.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not done with this project, but I'm kind of over it.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Okay, so let's see here. Let's actually see if we're getting.
I don't know why it's not doing that.
We could figure it out, I think, with the network tab. Let me just refresh this one more time. Okay. All right, let's see what we get here. Okay, so it's doing a post request to r.stripe.com/0. And we're not getting any errors from it. Is this the right URL? r.stripe? Isn't it test.stripe or something
Probably
like that?
not, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's test.stripe.com would be the... I think that's maybe why we're not getting a response from it. Yeah, so it looks like
Yeah,
we're
probably.
Okay. Yeah, this is good, though. This is the exact type of stuff that you want on your resume if you're applying for a job. At least for me, what I noticed, the two things that helped me out the most, the first one was having, I set up my GitHub profile so that when someone looked at it, how do I view my profile? Yeah, so I set it up with I forgot what the project's called, but there's that like open source README project. So I set it up so that people could look at it and actually see what I'm working on, which languages I use.
Does that update in real time?
Yeah, this updates every time I push a new repo or a commit or, a pull request, a merge, anything like that. It always updates this.
That's cool.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing this. And I'm using something called Wake a Time, I think.
You know T-SQL too?
Well, yeah, but the reason that shows up is so much of my is because I owned a collection agency for almost 10 years, and that's kind of like how I got into coding was I was sort of acting as like a data scientist for my own company to try to figure out who's most likely to pay based off the information that we have so we can call those people. And so I had to get really good with SQL. And, so I ended up with like probably hundreds of different, pre-written queries that I would like modify over time. And before I understood how GitHub worked, I just uploaded a giant folder of like hundreds of SQL files. And so it diluted everything pretty significantly. I don't ever push SQL to GitHub, and I haven't since like 2016. But it really skewed my stats pretty bad. So I should probably delete those at some point.
Yeah, I learned T-SQL, but I don't know if I still remember it.
Well, do you... Okay. Everyone uses MongoDB or Firestore, like these document databases these days. I think that there's still a lot of room for relational databases. I think that it's really difficult to model relational data in a document database. So I think that SQL is like a ridiculously important skill to have, even if like no one actually talks about it. Like when you hear about the MERN stack, everyone's referring to MongoDB. But from my experience at least, if you're going to use a document database like MongoDB or Firestore, past a certain level of complexity with like relational data, you're going to like drown trying to figure it out or trying to find like a good way to model everything. So I think SQL is super useful.
I agree.
Yeah. So what I would recommend is just actually Wake a Time. It's a
Waka time.
Yeah. So what it does is you could see your coding stats. So if I look at like the last month, for example, it'll say what languages I've used, which projects I was working on, all of this stuff. It's really cool. So the reason I brought this up is because it's pulling in, I mean, it's actually broken, but I have to fix that. But it does pull all this data in on my GitHub profile also. And I think that's part of the template. So I can figure out what this project is called and share it with the group. But the reason I'm bringing all this stuff up is because when I switched my LinkedIn status from, I don't remember what it was, when I changed it to open to work or looking for work, immediately I got just bombarded with a bunch of different recruiters trying to like pitch me on jobs. And then they would all ask for my resume, so I would give them my resume. And at the top of my resume, I said that my portfolio was this URL right here. And I got so many comments from recruiters just saying that they loved how this page was like laid out this way and that, it looked really good. And I feel like that made it so easy to actually find a job. And, I got so many interviews from it.
Really?
So, yeah, so if you're looking, I would definitely say like get your GitHub profile set up like this. And then just change your status on LinkedIn to looking for work or open to work. Update your skill sets. Make sure you have all the languages and frameworks and everything else that you work with listed on there somewhere. And the recruiters will just find you. And you're probably going to bomb a bunch of interviews when you first start out because it's intimidating, But at least you can like get the practice going through the interviews until you find a job that you're a good candidate for.
Yeah, I've already bombed a few interviews.
Did they make you turn your webcam on, and did they have someone watching you while you were doing some timed exercise?
Yeah, for a few of them. Yeah.
I know, it's so hard to concentrate.
It was the guy interviewing me, and he just asked me some questions like, how do you serve multiple versions of a REST API? Or how do you increase the performance and speed of loading websites faster? I replied with some dumb shit. I said something like, don't import modules that you're not gonna use.
Yeah.
I should have said something like cache or something like do some caching or something like that.
Okay, yeah, so it looks like React isn't tree shakeable by default, but it looks like if you're using a component library, it might be. So that's probably what I would have said if they asked about like how to make it more performant. I'd probably say like that I would set up my bundler to make sure that any unused components or functions are removed from the code base at build time. But those questions are so hard. When I was applying or when I was interviewing, my brother was living with me, and he shared a video with me recently of one of my interviews where he was hiding around the corner filming me while I did the interview. Oh my God, it made me cringe so bad listening to I was trying to come up with like intelligent sounding answers on the spot when I didn't really know what I was talking about. We were talking about some CSS library. I don't remember what it was, but it's something I clearly semantic UI. And I lied about having experience with semantic UI because the guy asked me, like, have you ever used semantic UI? And I just said yes because I was afraid to look stupid and say no. And he started asking me questions about it. And I watched this video back and I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I can't believe I did that. But it's so hard to, like, think clearly when you're in those high pressure situations.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, I think I'm gonna probably call it a day unless there's anyone who's been waiting. I don't want to. If there's anyone who's waiting,
let me DM you my resume, by the way.
Okay. And
if you want.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out, and I'll shoot you a message when I'm not streaming. But before I sign off for the day, I see we've got like, a few more people in the voice chat. So if anyone's been waiting, I don't want to jump off before getting a chance to, talk to anyone else who's looking to talk. So, anyone? Give it another minute or two, and then if not, I'll be taking off for the night.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. I've been watching your stream for like 30 minutes now, and I find your GitHub profile really interesting. Actually, I found you from Reddit. I had asked you a question about how to prepare for an internship. So yeah, so I would like a tutorial if you have time, how to set up a GitHub profile like yours. Can we all have a tutorial on that?
Yeah, so it was a long time ago that I set it up, but let me see if I could find the information real quick because I could at least point you in the right direction of how I got here. Let's see, check my repositories, and what you do is you create a repository that matches your GitHub profile name. So the repo that I'm looking for should be 716 green. If you do this, I think that by default, GitHub will create that profile page for you. See, it says right here, this is a special repository. The README will appear on your public profile. So for one, all I did really was I created a README file and I put it inside of a repo called 716 green. But there's some sort of framework at play here. And I really need to figure out what this is because I don't remember. This was so long ago that I put it together that I really don't remember. But yeah, let me make a note here and I'll get more information about it and I'll share that with everyone.
How many years have you been in the industry?
So I've been, I started writing SQL back in okay, let me take a step back actually. In 2008 or 2009, I started school for computer science, and I was in an intro to computer programming course that was using C++. I was too busy partying, not taking school seriously, and I ended up dropping out after like the first semester. I felt like I had missed a whole bunch of prerequisites or something because I felt like the dumbest person in the room. Then, as I got older, I was always still interested in programming. So around 2016, I was writing a bunch of SQL because I had a database for my company that I needed to interact with. And I was having a lot of fun just working with SQL. But I didn't think I would ever be capable of building my own software. Then I took a course on Coursera for video game development, and it was using Unity and C#. So I got a little bit of an intro to C#, and I started to realize, like, oh, this actually makes sense. I feel like I could dive a little bit deeper. So I started trying to self-teach C#, and I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anyone to ask questions to, and I found myself like I knew the syntax, but I couldn't make anything meaningful actually happen, and I didn't know how to figure that out. So I thought maybe I'm just working with the wrong language. So then I tried learning JavaScript. It just didn't click for me. I tried learning Python. And then what would happen is I would practice for a few days, and then I would take a few days off. And then when I went back to it, I forgot everything I was trying to learn. So that went on for maybe like 2 years on and off, where I would try learning a few languages. I would jump around a little bit, but nothing would ever stick. Then I want to say 2018, I picked up C# and .NET again. This time I had someone that was actually willing to like answer my questions and point me in the right direction once in a while, and that was really helpful. And I would say that's like when my programming journey really began, was like 2018. About 2018. I started building software for my company, and that's when I realized, like, okay, this is actually what I want to do. So in 2019, I sold my company and just spent the next 2 years doing nothing but learning to code, learning as many languages and frameworks and paradigms as possible. And then I got my first job as a developer in, in 2021. So, I mean, I've been doing this professionally for less than a year, but from 2019 to 2021, I built out a startup called DeadOS. And there's actually still people using it today. I had some interest for VC funding. This was actually built originally with Vue.js, MySQL, Node, and JavaScript. And I was using something called Vuetify, which is a Vue.js component library. This was the project that really like made everything make sense to me. And this is what made me feel comfortable applying for jobs. But then I decided to rebuild it, and I rebuilt the entire app from the ground up using React and Tailwind and TypeScript, like all new technologies, and GraphQL instead of Rust. And even though I didn't turn it into like a proper company, it, from 2019 to 2020, like that year and a half maybe, I feel like that's where I grew the most as a developer. That's where I went from being like a coder, like someone that just knew a little bit of syntax and would jump between different like languages, to actually being able to like build software and understand what's happening and why it's happening, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
I'm going to get off right now because I'm in the middle of something.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It was fun talking.
Thank you.
I appreciate you jumping into the call. All right. So we have still a bunch of people in here. So is there anyone else that wants to talk before I hop off?
Hello. So you were gonna show us how you were gonna set up your repo or something like that?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, just because I don't remember how I set this up, because we're talking maybe like, I don't know, I probably set this up in early 2019. So I need to do a little bit of research and actually figure out like how I set this up. I don't remember, so I can't really go through it right now. But I wanted to write a reminder for myself. All right. So I've got a reminder for myself, but I just don't remember how I did it right now, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
All right, so I think I'm gonna get off as well.
Okay.
I have to get my lunch.
All right, sounds good.
Hope to see you soon.
I'll message you as soon as I have the information. I'll send it to the whole group, but I'll ping you also, so you can get a look at that.
All right. Thanks for streaming.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for stopping by. And Joel AUC, Joel, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Did you have something you wanted to say? I didn't. I thought I saw your name light up there. Or anyone else for that matter. Because I'm gonna hop off as soon as we're out of questions here.
I've got nothing, man. Just here to learn, listen.
Cool. All right, anyone else? Last call before I hop off? Cool. Well, it's been fun. And I'll try to do this a little bit more often. I don't have like a set schedule. I'll kind of just like jump on and go live anytime I've got an hour or two to kill. I'm sure you've all noticed I'm not very organized right now, but I'm going to try to find like a better structure, a better way to actually go about doing these streams to be a little bit more productive and articulate maybe. So if anyone has any ideas or suggestions, please don't hesitate to share, because I'm just trying to figure this out as I go. But it's been fun. I appreciate you all stopping by, and I'll see you next time.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you, man.
man.
Good day.
All right, see you later.